Um, in the process of our discussions with your credit unions and others that don't happen to be on the line today about our change from where we are now in our current program to our new program that we're starting up to ramp up gradually starting this fall with PSCU, and we're very proud to be partnering with PSCU on a new debit and credit card program and all the other bells and whistles that are coming along with the great resources that PSCU is affording to us. We thought that, in the process of discussions, there are a few things that came up here and there that we thought it'd be easier to share and talk about and answer questions or whatever in some kind of I won't call it presentation, but exchange and a discussion and whatnot, where you could feel free to ask questions and it'd be easier to share with you some insight from some experts that we imposed on to bring on the line with us today. And you already heard from Chris Gunnare, who is the Senior Chief Member Experience Officer at PSCU. I think most of you, or maybe some of you, have, if not certainly not met him in person, but in one of these calls before, going back some time. But like I said, Chris, who we've been working with closely as Chief Member Experience Officer at PSCU. PSCU is the leading credit union service organization in this country, in the United States, providing products and financial services. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but to over 850 credit unions. And now I know, and maybe you'll touch on it, there's a bunch of banks added through a new relationship too. Those credit unions, though, have about 20 million debit and credit cards, and they generate about 2 billion transactions per year. And PSCU provides all the processing and all of the ancillary services that goes on with doing all of that for those credit unions. Prior to his time as Chief Member Experience Officer at PSCU, Chris had 24 years of experience with I guess I'll call it the Iowa Credit Union League, but to Chris and to others, it was the members group, which was their subsidiary, I guess I'll call it, that did EFT processing for credit unions across the country. So he has a lot of related experience under his belt, and we're glad to be kind of leaning on him this afternoon to share some insights with us. And with Chris is Mehdi Ben-Hadouch, who's based in Florida, where PSCU is also based. He's the regional vice president for PSCU. I did a little bit of background research on you, Mehdi, and although I feel I know you pretty well, I did not know that you speak 5 languages. So I was pretty impressed by that, and it's all I can do to handle 2 myself, and sometimes just with English being one of those, I have difficulty with that. So I'm impressed. But thank you, gentlemen, to both of you for joining us this afternoon. But we're going to start out talking about interchange. In the invoice that credit unions get every month from whoever their processor is, whether it be debit or credit, for EFT services, the actual cost of processing the transaction and driving ATMs and all of that is just part of it. But a big part of the revenue and expense that card issuing institutions deal with every month is tied directly to interchange. And there's a lot of confusion out there about interchange. It's very complex, and it varies a lot depending on networks, institutions, and where cardholders go and whatnot. And so we decided to impose on Brandi Gregory, who is from Cornerstone Advisors, and we've been working with for quite some time now. We've gotten to know her pretty well. And she's not a stranger to Vermont credit unions. Many, if not most, of the larger, not just credit unions, but banks in the state of Vermont have used Brandi's services as part of Cornerstone Advisors. Cornerstone, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, and Brandi can probably explain a little bit more, is a financial institution nationwide consulting and research firm used by banks and credit unions alike across the country. And what they do is help institutions get independent insights. They do research, they do contract negotiations, they do evaluations in the areas of fintech, payments, mergers, technology, lending, contract negotiations, like I mentioned, and a whole lot of other things that's way big laundry list. And when you think consulting, around here in Vermont, we think a few employees, but Cornerstone Advisors, since they have this national footprint and they're dealing with financial institutions across the country, by my count, and again, I may be wrong about this, but there are about 80 people that are working for Cornerstone Advisors in various capacities. So it's a significant sized organization. And like I said, I've been working with Brandi for some time now, educating us and guiding us along in everything to do with EFT services. Brandi formerly worked in a couple leadership positions at Vantiv, but we won't hold that against her. So thank you to coming to us from Cornerstone Advisors. She's a senior director at Cornerstone Advisors right now, focusing on contract negotiation and payments, helping the financial institutions that she deals with improve and optimize financial performance of their credit and debit card portfolios. She's also a blog contributor to something called Gonzo Banker that some of you may have run across before. And Brandi is coming to us from her home in Ohio today. So we're going to start with you, Brandi, and thank you very much for joining us and telling us all about the inside story on Interchange and how it works and maximizing it.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks so much for having me. And maybe it'll work to our benefit that I'm familiar with the association from my time at Vantiv WorldPay. I've been gone from there 6 years, but I see a familiar name out there in Tom Crapo. I think, Tom, we met years ago at an event, so it's fun to see names from my past, if you will. So Interchange is super confusing, and I think that it's intentionally that way. Excuse me. How I look at it, and I put it in two different buckets. You've got the signature interchange, and you've got the PIN network interchange. Our good friends with Durbin, right, required back in 2011 that you have an unaffiliated secondary PIN network, right, to your MasterCard or Visa front of the card brand. And with that came a lot of kind of scrutiny to our environment. I like to think about it super basic, though. And I remember when I first started in this industry 20 plus years ago, there was someone that had put together like a chart. I'm a visual person. I don't have this chart anymore, but I can describe it, right? And we think about Sally the shopper. So your member, when they go to Target, is probably one of the best examples I can give. When they go to Target and they insert their card, since we're not swiping anymore usually, but when they insert their card, you as the financial institution don't get to decide what happens with that transaction, right? Target actually decides what happens with that transaction. And the world has become even more complex that it used to be, oh, well, if I sign, then I know it's signature. If I put my PIN in, then I know it's PIN. Well, I think it was last year at least, Visa and MasterCard both eliminated the need for signature, right? Because that slowed the transaction down. I still am not entirely sure why that slowed the transaction down, because I don't think it was that complex of something to do. But in any event, they eliminated it. But then the PIN networks came along and they said, okay, well, if the transaction is under $50, you don't have to put your PIN in either. So you have the member that's shopping and they just want their card to work, right? And all of the mechanics of how that works all happen in the background with that acquirer and that acquirer processor. So that's why we had encouraged folks over the last handful of years at least that used to do rewards on debit. They would say, oh, well, if you sign for it, you get rewards, but if you put your PIN in, you don't. And you really can't do that anymore because the card holder is not choosing how to do that transaction anymore. Some of the big ones, and I know especially up in your all's region, right, grocery is another big one. Grocery stores in person will do whatever they possibly can to route that transaction in the cheapest possible way, right? And so again, your member doesn't get to choose how the transaction routes, But at the end of the day, it's either going to go to your front of the card brand, MasterCard or Visa, or your back of the card brand, which I think for a lot of you folks is going to be co-op POS, which is really Star, which is a whole separate level of confusion for you guys with your WorldPay relationship. You might have Genie with your WorldPay relationship. I think some of you might have Nice, or maybe you have Star Direct. So there's a couple of different options there, and I'm going to show a chart here in a second that I think will help to make more sense. But at the end of the day, how your relationship works today with WorldPay and the association is that the all of the transaction settlement, so where you have to pay for your cardholders and then you debit your cardholders, right? Transactions, and then the networks calculate what you've earned on that. And what you earn on that dictates whether or not it goes to MasterCard or Visa, or whether it goes to a PIN network, right, from the back of the card. And then it gets even more complex because there's like a basis points calculation depending on where you shopped and if your card was present or if it was online. I mean, it is intentionally confusing, in my opinion, right? So that's where we get to the world of blended rates. And the networks pay, on average, blended rates. So they take kind of all of your transactions put together, card present, card not present, and it comes up with kind of a blended rate. And that's the kind of two slides I want to show you guys really quick, because I think it helps illustrate well the kind of where we're at with this. So give me a nod if you can see a PowerPoint screen, or a thumbs up.
All set. We see it.
Okay, thank you. I have two monitors, so I'm always paranoid I'm going to share the wrong one. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So what this is showing you is this red dotted line is what you guys care about here. This is dual message exempt transactions. An exempt transaction is one associated with every institution that is not over 10 billion, okay? And then the blue dotted line is going to be single message exempt. Single message means the PIN network. They're making that even more complicated these days, but for the point of this conversation, we'll treat them as if they are separate and different for each other right now. So on average, you can see, even in a post-Durbin world, this goes out to through 2019, the interchange, the average interchange for Visa and MasterCard has stayed really steady between 50 and 60 cents, dipped down a little bit around that EMV timeframe, and it's slowly coming back up. Now, there were supposed to be some interchange increases that went into effect in October of this year, and they've all been pulled back for now. And then you get down here to the PIN world, and the dark solid lines are the exempt institutions. So here's where you can see that interchange for them, right, with Durbin fell off a cliff, and they're all flat now. PIN is really and truly coming down to that same level. So, you know, on average with the blend, depending on what your secondary network partner is, it's averaging somewhere between 20 cents and 29 cents per transaction is the PIN transaction. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions on this piece? I think the next slide will show it even more clearly. Okay. And Joe, if you can let me know if anybody asks anything in the chat, that would be great.
I sure
don't
will.
think I can
Thank
see
you.
the chat when I'm sharing the screen. Okay, so now it's all about, you know, PIN networks matter and who you're partnered with that matters. Now this is showing a comparison to 2018 because this survey is always delayed. So this is from the Federal Reserve site in September of 2020. We'll get an update to this, I believe, like in May. We'll be able to get 2019 data in here. It's always a pretty decent delay for this comparison. But why I love this slide is it shows that in 2013, MasterCard's average interchange was about 55 cents a transaction on the blend. And in 2018, MasterCard is averaging about 58 cents on the blend. And again, the blend is really important. And I think we're going to see that come up even more because dual transactions, so signature transactions and e-commerce transactions, pay a lot more interchange than card present transactions. So you guys may have seen some interchange lift in this last year with your membership, especially on the debit side, as people transitioned to online shopping and grocery pickup or grocery delivery. Those all went from card present transactions to card not present transactions, which pays you a higher interchange rate, even at the grocery. So Visa
Brandi?
on average, yeah.
Brandi, this is Chris. I was just going to add to that. I find often it's good too to kind of try to understand how many of your members are spending at Walmart, because Walmart's interchange rates they're different than everyone else's, and so they can skew your overall numbers based on how many of your transactions go through Walmart.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. How your cardholders are spending, how your members are spending is very impactful to your interchange earn. The other thing, the other kind of caveat that I'll put with this, we like this because it's third-party source data. It is self-reported by the networks. So I have a lot of Visa clients that I work with. None of them are earning 51 cents a transaction. It's all closer to 45 to 47 cents a transaction. MasterCard, I don't have any clients at 58 cents a transaction. And this is all before fees come out, guys. So this is all true, pure interchange. MasterCard, we typically see on average is 53 to 54 cents a transaction. And again, it is very geographic. We typically don't see Walmart impacting as heavily in the MasterCard and Visa space because Walmart will do whatever they can possible to send that transaction via the PIN networks. Because as you can see, it's a lot cheaper. The other thing that happened in the pandemic is that the PIN networks eliminated the cap. So it used to be if the transaction was $50 or less, it could be PINless. And now most networks eliminated that threshold with the pandemic. Some raised their cap to $100 to $150. So we saw a lot more volume going PINless than we would have seen previously because those changes were put in by the networks. But on average, here's the interchange rates. Michelle and I were chatting before this, and she said, Brandi, a lot of our members have co-op POS. So I will tell you that up until about 2 months ago, that completely threw me for a loop because to me, co-op is an ATM network, a surcharge-free ATM network. So doing some digging on that, and co-op at the time of Durbin, they partnered with Star, if you will, to white label their network, but they're reselling Star. So if on your invoice and in reporting you see co-op POS, that's really Star. It's paying out at the Star rates, just so it's not confusing that co-op isn't listed here. It's truly Star. So we see different processors do different things with interchange. Back when I was with, I started at WorldPay back in the day when it was Midwest Payment Systems. I think a lot of you guys have probably been around long enough to remember that name as well. So back in 99, I think is when I started there. They did interchange differently. They didn't do it 100%. They kind of, they scraped some interchange to pay fees, right? And a lot of folks, that used to be kind of how things were done, right? They would say, I'm going to net your fees out of your interchange, and then I'll just end up paying you the difference, right, on a monthly basis. Well, when interchange got complex, and really and truly that happened in the early 2000s where interchange started to get complex with, card present, card not present. If we think about it, back in that time period in the mid 90s, there wasn't really e-commerce shopping. It's hard to think about that, but there wasn't, not to the level there is today. So when interchange got so complex, what was happening with a lot of processors is they were starting to lose money because they couldn't figure out how to manage that process anymore. So the majority of processors out there really do treat interchange separate from expense now, and kind of say, okay, here's all your income, dollar for dollar, based on who you are, how your members spend, what networks you belong to. And that's really important, guys, what networks you belong to. And then, you know, here's your expenses for processing. You know, I beat on a drum here at Cornerstone, and when, you know, to all of our clients, it was back in the day, these secondary networks back here, so these single message networks listed here, they used to be very regional, right? And you could think, okay, well, we're in Vermont, but we have a lot of snowbirds, and Star isn't very prevalent in Vermont. So maybe you're like, oh, I need to have Star to service Florida and Nice to service Vermont. You don't have to do that anymore. These networks are all coast to coast across the entire US. No network out here do I really consider them to be regional. The only network that's goofy, for lack of a better word, is Genie. And the reason why I say that is Genie's proprietary. So Genie is a proprietary network owned by WorldPay. The only way you can belong to Genie is if you are processed by WorldPay. So with FIS's acquisition of WorldPay, our girl Genie here is going to disappear. I make her feminine because if you've been around long enough, you'll remember that Genie used to be a woman with a bun. She kind of looked like Aunt Jemima. She was purple and had a big blonde bun on top of her head, for anyone that has been around the Genie network that long. I don't know why, but she was. But Genie is going to go away and be replaced by Nice, and we have had that confirmed. So if you are, you know, a MasterCard issuer with Genie, Genie is going to go away. And so, like with the move to PSCU for the association, Genie has to go away anyway, because like PSCU does not connect to Genie as a network, because Genie again is not a third-party network. It was a proprietary in-house network, really intended, I think it was created back in the day, so Fifth Third Bank would have their own little like internal network where they wouldn't have any interchange that they had to pay, or fees that would have to pay, because it would kind of like route internally. But then, you know, the government came along and said, no, you can't do that anymore. No more internal routing. All transactions must hit MasterCard or Visa. So Genie is going to go away with that. So I think that, but I think most of your issuers, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, have another network besides Genie. Or maybe that's more a Michelle question.
Well, right. And I'm going to ask Michelle to weigh in here. And, you know, going way back in ancient history, when we first started the program, when we first formed Falcon with the two other, what was it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 institutions and the association. The only reason that we got involved with Genie, and everybody's cards has a Genie bug on it, is because, as you were referencing, Genie was the internal mechanism that Fifth Third,
to make Falcon work,
so on and so forth, all the iterations of our current processor used to route those transactions. But at some point, I forget where along the ways, the need to do that kind of fell by the wayside. And so some institutions stayed on Genie or kept it, and a few dropped it.
Yeah, and I think, Joe, our challenge during that time, you know, from 1999 until the 2000s was, like Brandi was saying, the networks were regional, you know, so those that had Nice were in Northeast, and we had a lot of credit unions that had issues if we didn't have other networks. So that's why we ended up having Genie on the cards, as well as, you know, of course, the Maestro and Cirrus. But, you know, it was a challenge. Those who were going out in New England were having problems with their cards. And then, like she said, it's not like that anymore.
Yep. So what questions, if any, can I answer for anyone? Is this, Joe, is this kind of what you wanted me to hit on? I think what's really important, guys, is that, you know, one thing else I would mention here is that MasterCard and Visa, and I kind of reference that they always get mad at me when I say stuff like this, but to me, they're the same. I don't want you to look at this and think, oh my gosh, on Visa, I need to flip to MasterCard and get another 7 cents a transaction. Nope, because guess what? With MasterCard comes higher fees, right?
Yeah, we're
Visa's
not
fees are
seeing.
lower. Visa's interchange is lower. Sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say we're definitely not seeing that return, if not lower than the other one.
Right. So I think they all net to the same place in the end. So MasterCard's fees average about 28 basis points for every dollar of spend that goes through there. And Visa runs about 23 basis points. So that 5 basis point differential in fees totally makes up the interchange differential, in my opinion. And so I don't, when people come to me and say, oh, I heard if I go to MasterCard, I make more money. And I'm like, it all comes out in the wash, in my opinion. And I'm not a fan of, flipping just to flip for fun. You flip when it makes sense for your business model or something else that you're doing.
Yeah, no,
But
I think
in general,
I'm sorry, Brandi. I think one of the challenges, as well as the benefits, is to look at a switch now, which we've encouraged credit unions putting Visa on the table, just to get some extra dollars on the table as well, but also look at the networks we're currently using, which ones can we drop, and really truly make a great change at the time of conversion. It's the best time. It's of course the cheapest, as well as looking at that the co-op side and looking at, is nice exclusivity a really good thing to look at, or if you're bringing in Plus and Interlink, their rate seems to be a little bit higher. But again, like you said, it was, only them reporting that information. So
But one other thing really fast, because I know you guys are looking at Visa as an option. It's a great idea to look at that, especially if you're going to enhance your card program through the process. So if it's going to be because you go to EMV, right, or because you might be able to offer contactless or something like that, that's a perfect time to change brands, again, because you're able to get the dollars from the network to help you offset those expenses. And I think, Michelle, that's one of the things you're working with a lot of the association members is, there's some folks that maybe aren't EMV yet that could flip their brand and get some money to upgrade to EMV or to contactless. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. That we are looking at that option as well, just putting everything on the table and also looking at the networks and just saying, okay, which ones can we drop? Which ones can we make better? Because again, they can always change so fast. So, for any reason, we be nice on there, but the nice Genie merger, if things change dramatically, because Genie is a lot lower than nice, are we going to see nice start to drop? So I just want to make sure we put these credit unions into a position where it won't hurt them down the road. And we can always make a change, but it's easier to try to make the best one now and look at the program later.
But the bottom line for us, I think, going forward is that, and I think this came out a little bit already, is that we, Michelle, and I've heard Brandi use this term before, we are network agnostic, as is PSCU. And so, if a credit union wants to do one versus the other, or make a change or not make a change, or add 5 networks instead of 2, or whatever it wants to do is
no, don't do that.
Yeah, I know. I think part of our job going forward is to
just educate.
Offer some guidance and some analysis for credit unions of the kind of information Brandi is sharing here, to help guide them. And PSCU is obviously going to help us with this too, because they have a lot of expertise in this area, to be able to help credit unions make intelligent decisions about why should I not add that network or switch to that network, or why should I stay where I am.
One thing I think that's good to say is, whether it's PSCU or any processor, no processor can guarantee a credit union a rate or rates. And that's I think Brandi's comments at the beginning around really the acquirer, really the merchant, the location your members are making that purchase, make the decisions of how that transaction gets routed. And that ultimately determines the rate that they pay and the rate that the credit union or bank earns. And so I think that's really important as well too.
Right.
Yeah, I think, and overall,
so there's one other.
sorry, Brandi, just overall looking at your program and continue to looking at it year by year. It's just so important with PSCU's help to just make sure that, we have that partnership and making sure we help credit unions look at that and where can we gain, where have we lost, and continue to strive for getting that bottom line to pay for the program for sure.
Yeah, so I'm just going to add one other thing really quick. And if this makes your head hurt, I'm one of those weird pin weirdos. Like, I think this stuff is so fascinating. This pin stuff is so fascinating. But maybe, I don't know, it's one of my quirks. So sometimes people will look at this chart and they'll say, oh, Maestro is 24 cents and Genie is 25 cents. Well, heck, I'm going to go to Pulse because it's 27. The distinct difference between Genie and Maestro and even Interlink out here versus everybody else, Genie and Maestro, because I think, Michelle, all your credit unions are MasterCard today for debit, is that right?
Currently today, yeah. And that was because at the time
Okay.
in '99 we got incentives to move that direction. Yeah.
You're good. So Genie and Maestro don't support pinless. They don't support e-commerce. So what's great for you guys today, if you guys are Genie, Maestro, MasterCard, for any credit union that might be that combination, any of your Amazon traffic is my best example here, is all going to MasterCard. And these other networks out here, Star, Pulse, Nice, Excel, QLiance, etc., they support those transaction types. So Amazon gives you the ability when you're setting up your payment method, if you want your transaction to go via a debit transaction or a credit transaction. Nobody in their right mind understands what those boxes are when they're putting their payment card in Amazon. Heck, we probably all put our card in there 5 years ago before any of this even came up. Their default is to get that transaction to a PIN network.
Yeah, and it's
so
hit us
again, for the institutions, yeah. So for the institutions that are MasterCard, Genie, and Maestro on your cards, you're in a great spot because you don't support e-commerce or pinless today. So all of your traffic that is possible is going to MasterCard signature. So that's the other complexity that you added here, right? Is when we're thinking, okay, well, we need to replace Genie because if we move to PSCU, Genie can't go with us. Who's the best one to replace it with? It's Interlink. So if you're going to stay MasterCard on the front of the card and you already have Maestro, Interlink functions the most like Genie out of everybody else on this list, and your transactions should continue to route how they're routing today. So that's like the super fascinating part about all this is picking your dance partner is really important because we want to pick the dance partner that is going to maximize your interchange potential, but it is as good as the day is long. So, the DOJ is not super happy with Visa and MasterCard right now. They never are, though. But they're, all these veiled threats that they're going to force them to support e-commerce because they don't think that they're playing fair with the online merchants. And so we'll see what happens. But, I'm a huge proponent of shorter terms on PIN networks. I'm a huge proponent on, figuring out where your cardholders are spending today and how you can maximize the interchange component. But I'm also a huge proponent of clarity. So I really don't like when it's guaranteed or cobbled together or netted. It just because I don't think it's super clear to you. So if anybody has any questions, please, feel free to ask, or if you have questions that come up afterwards. My favorite thing to do is talk about this stuff. I have so many opinions on PIN networks. So, feel free to reach through Michelle, or, you had my email address on the meeting invite. Feel free to shoot me an email. I'm always happy to chat about this stuff. I just think it's so fascinating.
Clearly, Brandi, you need some other activities in your life.
Right. I'm super bored, but I love talking about PIN.
I'm
a weird, like I said, I'm a weirdo.
I want to encourage everyone to feel free to ask any questions while we've got Brandi and also Chris on the line, or post it in the chat box that I'm watching here. But I've got one question for you that's kind of a sidebar kind of thing. It's not really specific to card issuers and selection of networks and whatnot. But, I interface with my counterparts and advocacy people from other states every week for the for a long time now. And one of the issues that we're starting to hear come up not in Vermont, but in other state legislatures while they're in session, is discussion about interchange and in their respective states. And I know back in 2010, before the Durbin Amendment went into play, the merchants had an effort in about 5 different states, Vermont being one of them, Georgia being another, and there were 3 or 4 others, because they weren't making headway in Congress, and they were trying to put interchange controls on the docket in each one of those state legislatures. And then they started to get traction in Congress, so the effort in states fell by the wayside. But ever since then, talking about all of what you just addressed, Brandi, with legislators, is very complex, right? But it's very easy for them to understand when merchants say, hey, my bill is too big for processing transactions by accepting plastic cards and whatnot, and it's out of control, and they just call their whole bill that they get from their processor interchange. And so there's, a lot of misconception on the other side of the transaction table and whatnot. But there have been some reports that I've gotten from other state credit union leagues lately of efforts in their state legislatures or discussions in their state legislatures by lawmakers about trying to impact and further cap or eliminate interchange on certain types of payments that are made in their state. Like specifically in some states, I've heard about state-related payments where the state is accepting payment for, a fishing license or a motor vehicle registration or those kinds of things, and saying you can't assess, or somebody paying taxes with a plastic card, you can't assess interchange on those transactions because they're government related and so on and so forth. And so that just brings me back around to, do either of you, Chris or Brandi, see any reality to someday, what would happen if some state successfully passed legislation to impose some kind of artificial limitation like that? It seemed like it would be leading to chaos because, people are using their cards not only across the country but across the world. It's not a state by state kind of thing.
Yeah. So really quick, let me answer, and then if Chris wants to add to it. I think what's interesting in states, so in Ohio, where I'm at, it's actually $7.95 to use my card to pay for my car tax. I have to pay a fee. They would rather I give them a check to pay for my car tags. So, I think that's how the states have gone around it a little bit, Joe, is they've imposed their own fees. MasterCard and Visa, per their rules, state that a merchant can't turn down accepting a card for a minimum. Although sometimes you'll go into gas stations and it'll say things like $5 minimum transaction to use your card. They can't actually technically enforce that. It's against the MasterCard and Visa rules. And if you wanted to, call the MasterCard and Visa police on that merchant, you could, because they're not allowed to have signs up like that. But businesses can assess a fee to process the transaction. So that's how I think some people have gotten around it. What I really see happening with interchange and it's not going to be immediate, right? It's going to take a long time to get there. There's in Europe, there's no interchange fluctuation like this. What is, Chris, you may know, I think it's like in the EU, isn't it like 20 cents a transaction, no matter what kind of transaction it is? It's flat and fixed across the board.
I think we're kind of moving to that too. I mean, you can
I do too. I mean, that's the path, Joe, I think they're going to head, is ubiquity with the rates, no matter what the network is, that everything basically becomes Durbin regulated at that flat rate. Durbin's even sticking their nose into credit a little bit now. So credit is left alone, and credit can earn no matter what size you are. And now they're starting to poke at credit a little bit. So I just think it's a matter of time before we either go the European model, which we tend to run like 10 years behind Europe in all things payments. So maybe it'll be another 10 or 15 years before we get to that point. But I don't see state by state messing with it, Joe, to be honest with you. I think they're continuing to lean on Congress to make the changes.
I do agree. I do agree they're trying to make those changes. I would say I come from a state that is state regulated. So Shazam in the state of Iowa has effectively inserted into the code of the state in the 80s that every PIN
Blows
transaction
my
that
mind.
originates in Iowa has to route through them. And so essentially they create a monopoly where all of the transactions have to go through them. And if you look at their interchange tables and how they pay financial institutions, they take excessive fees out of the interchange and net back to the financial institution, the credit union. And so it's hard to tell. Your interchange looks lower, but it's lower really because they have an
The
excessive.
fees are netted.
Yeah, they're netted.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where overall, and I know some of you in talking with Joe had mentioned that you might be looking or hearing from some other outside the area processors. And I think overall in this, I think that's one of the biggest advantages you're going to get in partnering with the association and PSCU, because we've got more resources that care, that are dedicated to helping you research this, understand it, make the right decisions, and then support you. I think that's massive because these organizations that come in that really are not in the area, they're not going to be there when you need help differently than all of you grouping together and us supporting all of you. And so I think there are big advantages there.
Thank you for that. Hey, questions from anybody or comments from anybody, feel free to unmute or, like I said, post in the chat box. Don't be shy, please. This interchange in particular is a complicated area, as we've all seen.
Yeah, my number one rule on this is there are no dumb questions. I think I tell Michelle and
Right.
Christina every time we talk. They're like, I have a dumb question. I'm like, there are no dumb questions when it comes to this because it's super confusing.
Right. It certainly is.
And they're smart on it to begin with.
Uh-huh. Okay, I think everyone's going to be shy today, or you've done a great job at answering all their questions in advance, one or the other. I don't know which. Thank you so much, Brandi. We appreciate your
Yeah, you bet.
kind of neutral expertise on all of this and guidance, and we enjoy the relationship that we have with you for kind of educating us too. Chris, what other things should we be touching on for the next few minutes while we've still got folks on the line here and their
I
attention?
think you see some of the benefits of all of us working together, helping each other. And I think Brandi too, she's very involved in a lot of credit unions in Vermont, financial institutions even. And I think that's where we really do care. And so as we partner with the association and frankly, almost every single credit union in the state, I think that's where true benefits come out of this. The deep benches of resources that can help make your lives easier and then make your members' experiences a lot better. And so it's hard kind of, I think, because Joe and Michelle and Christine and team kind of help behind the scenes, but behind them, we've got 1,500 employees dedicated to supporting credit unions and banks. And I think that's a huge differentiator as we go through technology changes, as we go through networking and interchange and consumer behavior changes, to partner with people that care, that have deep pockets that can help you deliver faster, better experiences to your members and customers.
So you remind me, Chris, that I think it's an opportune time to, while we've got everyone on the line, to share something I've been thinking about for a while now, and that's that, when we make this change to the PSCU platform, our role as an association is going to be changing quite substantially. And, the investment that we made quite a few years ago now in, internal software and programming and all that kind of stuff which is all written off for some time now, is going to be gone because there won't be a need for that anymore. And the PSCU system is wonderful and the interface is great and whatnot. So credit is going to be able to do a lot of things on their own that they hadn't been doing up until now, or they're not doing now, if they so choose. But our role is going to become more on a daily basis of far less of the daily manual, I'll call it manual labor kinds of things, and far more, consulting, like Michelle was talking about earlier, sitting down with a credit union to analyze, what it ought to do or avoid with networks and whatnot, and problem resolution, putting out fires and things of that nature. So, we're going to be fulfilling the role of a local advocate, like you said, Chris, a local resource, but, not touching every transaction and every card and all that kind of stuff, unless the credit union wants that. So, like I said, our role is going to be changing, but I think there's a value, I hope there's a value to credit unions in having that local advocate, in addition to the deep resources and pockets, frankly, of a national processor like PSCU that's a credit union service organization.
I think you add on to that, Joe, the ability to grow with a credit union and their resources. And so as credit unions may want to do some things themselves, as they want more technologies within the credit union, I think that's where our partnership really lets things move between the credit union to the association to PSCU. Even in our partnership together, every credit union in Vermont will have full access to PSCU's resources and experts. And so we're just kind of like doubling the association's bench strength and expertise. And I think that's a great thing. I've been supporting credit unions in the state of Vermont for over 20 years. And I think you are special to us. And I think having an advocate that cares gets you things faster, easier, better, lower cost, which I think is important in the future, today and in the future.
Thank you, Chris. So I don't want to keep people on the line needlessly if we don't need to, but I also don't want to cut off anybody's question that they might have about anything at all, or comment if it fits here. Michelle, Christine, anything further from either one of you, or have we covered it all for today?
No, I think we're great. I think the challenge for me, and as Brandi, I love all this stuff. I've been in it with the association for 20 years and learned so much, and every day I learn something new. And so I really look forward to working with PSCU and making these partnerships with the credit unions stronger and their card program stronger. And, I know the bottom line for the credit unions to have the card program pay for itself, which is so key. But also I think now in today's world and looking at what COVID did for everything, I think the CUcard and ATM machines, which were starting to go away, I think are going to come into play more and more, and just improving people's programs across the board, and just get them the tools in their members' hands to keep them competitive, for sure.
I don't know about
thank everyone. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. And Brandi, I really learned a lot from what you just showed, because, as people know, I don't have my expertise in that area. I have my expertise in lending, and this was really an eye-opening.
Thank you, Christine. I don't know about the credit unions on the line with us today, but, in the couple of years before this past year of pandemic, up to a couple of years before, it seemed like, getting back to Michelle's comment about ATM machines and whatnot, and use of them, it seemed like, there were a lot of financial institutions, not just in Vermont but nationwide, that were doing less and less brick and mortar. And then all of a sudden, for the past couple of years, it seems like, I know in my neck of the woods, small corner of Vermont, it seems like, new brick and mortar by financial institutions, be it bank or credit union, has kind of exploded, and they're popping up in a lot of different places. And with each one of those comes more, ATM machines with each one of those, because that's given for a lot of people and whatnot. And I also think that, during this past year, all of our credit union members and consumers in general have come to rely a lot more on that plastic card. And I think that's going to be the case going forward. So, it's fortunate for us anyway, that, we made the decision when we did to make our switch to PSCU, where I think there's more forward-thinking opportunities for us going forward among consumers that are going to be thinking a lot more about how can I access my funds, more remotely and more easily going forward, and have control on my phone or whatever device and whatnot of my card and so on and so forth. So anyway, we'll continue to provide more information and maybe have some more of these kind of information calls on some different features and whatnot going forward. But in the meantime, if anybody's got any questions or comments, again, this is the time to feel free to ask, or if you're not comfortable doing it here, feel free to send an email to Christine, Michelle, me after this, after we all adjourn here, and we'll address it that way. Anything else from anybody?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. We enjoy partnering with you, Joe. As I've mentioned to you before, we would be willing to jump on the phone with you and any individual credit unions at any time if they'd like to learn or understand anything else.
That's awesome, Chris. And yes, that's a reminder to me to extend an invitation to each one of the credit unions on the line here that we'll meet with you individually, certainly, whether it's in this format or by phone or whatever else, to talk about whether it's Interchange or ATM deployment or, some new feature that we're going to be talking about, or anything else. It's all fair game. Okay. Well,
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Thank
spending
you.
the past 57 minutes with us, and we hope you have a good day and a good upcoming weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandi.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Brandi.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Bye.